Sienna, I want a divorce, Xander suddenly said as I was doing the dishes. His words hit me out of nowhere, leaving me stunned.
What?
Why? I asked, trying to make sense of the situation. Xander's response came quick. I'm about to inherit $6 million. It's a lot of money, but it's mine, and I'm not planning on sharing it with you. I couldn't understand why he was talking about a divorce just because of some money. What does that have to do with anything? I asked, confused. The truth is, I only stayed with you for the money. Your paycheck isn't much, but it's better than nothing. So I put up with this marriage. But now, with this $3 million, I don't need you anymore. I want to live a carefree life on my own, so let's just end this, he said, bluntly. I stayed quiet for a moment, letting his words sink in. Then I simply said, fine. If you're that sure, then sell the house. It'll take care of the mortgage too. Xander looked surprised. He probably expected a fight, but I was tired. This was my way out of the draining life I had been living. I grabbed some papers and slammed them onto the table in the living room, feeling a sense of finality. Let me tell you a bit about myself. My name is Sienna. I love kids and work as a preschool teacher. I met Xander, who's 2 years older than me, through a mutual friend. We've been married for nearly 8 years now. We bought this house thinking we'd start a family soon. Back then, I believed we had a bright future ahead of us. But not long after we tied the knot, Xander's attitude changed. He became obsessed with money. Before we got married, he always told me how great my job was. But that changed, and soon he started belittling me. Sienna, all you do is play with kids all day while I'm working my butt off. You've got it easy. People like you are freeloaders, he'd say. And soon, that became his favorite insult. Being a preschool teacher isn't easy. Every child is different, and we're responsible for their well-being. But Xander didn't care about that. He never listened. His words would sting, and I often cried alone, feeling helpless. The reason we never had kids? That was all Xander too. Anytime I mentioned wanting children, he'd shoot it down. If you've got time to think about kids, you should be working more. We've got a mortgage, taxes. What are you even thinking? His voice would rise, and I'd stay quiet, feeling like I had no say in my own life. Sure, Xander earned more than me, but it wasn't by much. His paycheck was only a few thousand more than mine, yet he acted like it made him so much more important.
He'd always hold it over my head.
Meanwhile, I took pride in my job, and his constant criticisms cut deep. It was humiliating, and it made me question my worth. To make things worse, he started wanting more time alone. I could live by myself, you know, he'd remind me. But I've stuck around out of necessity. Don't forget that. His constant belittling made me wonder if something had changed at work. He was working longer hours, doing more overtime, yet his salary didn't seem to be increasing. I knew this because I managed our finances. He wasn't bringing in more money, despite all his complaints. Maybe that's what made him so angry, because he started lashing out more often. One day, after another one of his rants, he exploded, angrier than I had ever seen him before. Who do you think makes this lifestyle possible? If I wanted to, I could leave you in a second. Be prepared, he said, his voice filled with venom. Xander wasn't always like this. Before we got married, he was kind and supportive. But after that outburst, things between us got worse. We barely talked anymore. The distance between us grew, and I felt more alone than ever. Then came Thanksgiving. We visited Xander's parents, and as we sat around the table, his mother brought up a topic I had been thinking about for years. You've been married for 8 years now, right? Sienna, I remember you used to say you wanted kids soon. Have you decided how many you want? Finally, I thought, a chance to talk about this openly. But before I could respond, Xander jumped in. Mom, we're not having kids. Sienna and I have talked about it, and we've decided not to. I was shocked. What? That's not true. I started to say, but Xander cut me off, lying through his teeth. Yeah, she hates the idea of having kids. She says it's enough dealing with them at work. Wait, what are you talking about? I tried to explain, but Xander just kept talking. Mom, can you please stop bringing it up? It's stressful for Sienna too. His mother nodded, clearly uncomfortable. Well, If that's what you've decided, that's fine, she said, before leaving the room. In the car on the way home, I confronted him. Why would you say that? I love children and want to have them. You're the one who's always saying no. Xander shrugged. We can't afford a child because you don't work full-time. Once you start making as much as me, we can talk. Until then, don't bother. I felt my heart sink. I thought preschool teachers earn more. What a letdown, he added, shaking his head. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Xander went on, laughing. From the start, I never wanted kids. They're just too expensive, and I'd rather spend that money on myself. I sat there in silence, shocked by his words. Everything he said made me feel small, worthless. At that moment, I realized just how broken our relationship was. Zaria's father seemed like a very polite man, but I didn't feel comfortable sharing my personal issues with him, especially since they were so embarrassing. These weren't problems I could easily talk about. However, Zaria was persistent. Miss Sienna, I can tell something's bothering you. You should talk to my dad, Zaria said with genuine concern. I smiled, trying to ease her worries.
Thank you, Zaria.
I really appreciate your concern, but some things are hard to talk about, even with someone close. Her father gently chimed in. I understand. It's tough to open up, but my daughter is really worried about you. If there's anything going on, please let me help. To my surprise, he handed me his business card, and when I looked at it, I saw his title. That moment felt like a turning point for me. It was then that I made the decision to take revenge on Xander. I wasn't going to let him walk all over me anymore. Just as I was preparing for my next steps, Xander came to me out of the blue. Hey, how about we get a divorce? He asked casually, as if he were discussing what to have for dinner. It had been a while since Xander came home early, and we were sitting down to eat together. My hands, busy washing dishes, froze mid-motion. Maybe he thought I was caught off guard by his sudden proposal because he grinned smugly. You might not like it, but my mind is made up, he said, looking far too pleased with himself. May I ask why? I said, trying to keep my voice calm. Well, I've got a huge sum of money coming my way. Do you want to know how much? $6 million. That's right, $3 million, Xander said, even though I hadn't asked for any details. He just kept talking, his excitement obvious. I've stayed with you because, well, your paycheck isn't much, but it's better than nothing. But now that I've got $3 million, I don't need you anymore. Let's end this quickly. You're probably tired of being a leech anyway. The words stung, but I didn't let it show. Where did all that money come from? I asked, feeling suspicious. That's none of your business. We're strangers now, he replied coldly. All right, I understand. Let's separate then, I said without hesitation. Xander was clearly taken aback by how easily I agreed. I guess he thought I'd beg him to stay, or cause a scene. I'm not planning on staying in this tiny house any longer, he continued. I'm thinking of using the money to move into a mansion, so I'm selling this house too. That's fine, I said, feeling a strange sense of relief. I'll start looking for an apartment. You can take care of the mortgage on this house, right? Yeah, I'll pay it off. That's only fair, Xander muttered, sounding like he was doing me a huge favor. After all, I'm the one with the money now. Thanks, that would be great, I said, staying calm, though a storm of emotions was brewing inside me. That was the moment I decided to act. I began packing, searching for a new place to live, and setting up my escape. The days became busy as I planned my move and prepared for my future, free from Xander's toxic presence. When the divorce process was almost finalized, I set up a meeting with Xander to go over the details. I'll leave the mortgage payments to you, Xander, I said, sliding a document across the table. I don't want any arguments later about what was said or not, so I've written everything down. Please sign this agreement. Fine, Xander huffed. As long as you don't start complaining about it later. I held back my frustration as he added yet another unnecessary remark, as if he couldn't help but be condescending. It was infuriating, but I stayed composed. As he skimmed through the agreement, his eyes stopped on one section. Wait, what's this about alimony? Why should I be the one paying? If anything, you should be the one paying since you don't work full-time. I stayed calm, even though his arrogance made my blood boil. You thought you could get away with this, didn't you? You're so naive, I said, sliding some documents across the table. Xander's face paled as he looked at them. Thanks for all the overtime you've been working lately, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. You must really love your job, don't you, Xander? Or should I say, you love spending time with your mistress? I laid down a photograph in front of him. It showed Xander with another woman, looking far too cozy together. This woman is just a junior colleague. We're not doing anything. You're trying to set me up, he stammered, trying to defend himself. Oh, really? I said, handing him another photo. This one of Xander and the same woman entering a hotel together. Still want to deny it? For some reason, instead of admitting defeat, he got even angrier. This has to be fake. Do you know how advanced photo editing is these days? You really think you can trick me with this? I sighed, realizing he wasn't going to admit to anything easily. But I had anticipated this. This isn't something I put together, I said, standing up. I think they'll be here soon.
Just then, the doorbell rang.
Xander looked nervous, clearly not knowing what to expect. I opened the door and led my guests into the living room. This is my attorney, I introduced him. The evidence was gathered by a private investigator, so there's no chance it's fake. If you doubt it, we can call them right now. My lawyer, with a confident smile, turned to Xander. I'm here to assist with the divorce proceedings. If you have any questions about the photographs, feel free to ask. Xander's face went pale, and he started to panic. His claims of working overtime had been a lie. The investigator found out that he wasn't staying late at the office. He was leaving on time and spending his nights with his mistress. That's why his income hadn't changed, despite all his so-called overtime. Finally, everything made sense. Xander's recent obsession with wanting to be alone had nothing to do with needing space. He was seeing someone else, and he was too arrogant to think he'd ever get caught. The private detective I hired was highly skilled, and it was all thanks to Zarya. Her father, as it turns out, is the CEO of a well-known company. When Zarya said her dad was a superhero, she wasn't exaggerating. After hearing about my situation, he immediately contacted a private detective agency and introduced me to a lawyer. At first, I thought it was overkill, but the more I uncovered about Xander, the angrier I became. That's when I decided to go all in. You think you're so clever, Xander sneered. You want alimony? Fine, I'll give it to you. I've got $6 million. I can afford it. Now, if we're done here, leave. I never want to see your face again. I would have left even if you hadn't said that. From now on, if anything comes up, we'll talk through the lawyer. Don't contact me directly. Who would ever want to see you? Xander spat out his final words. I packed my things in silence and left the house. Xander's arrogance never ceased to amaze me, even in the final moments of our marriage. I thought my chapter with Xander was closed, but a few months after settling into my new apartment, something unexpected happened. While I was adjusting to my new life, Xander reappeared. My stress had vanished after the divorce, and though the end of my marriage had been shocking at first, I felt nothing but relief. I didn't love him anymore. Then, one day, Xander showed up at my apartment, banging on the door and yelling, "Please listen to me." Reluctantly, I let him in. "What do you want?" "I've told you I don't want anything to do with you anymore." Xander had the audacity to smirk as he glanced around my apartment. "You've got a nice place here. If there are 2 rooms, I'll move into 1. We can live together again, right?" "What are you talking about?" I said, disgusted. "There's no way I'm living with a stranger." "Don't be so cold. We were married once, remember? We're legally strangers now," I said firmly. "What do you want?" Xander's expression turned pitiful. "I need you, Sienna. I realized that I made a mistake. You were always the best thing for me." I was confused. "You were living in a mansion with your mistress, Xander. You didn't need me then." "That was just a moment of confusion," he pleaded. "I need you, Sienna. You still love me, right?" I stared at him, completely bewildered by his desperation. "Didn't you tell me you didn't need me anymore because you were getting $6 million? Why don't you go find another wife with all that money?" Xander started to cry. "I thought I'd won the lottery. I thought I had $3 million, but I misread the numbers. I jumped the gun, and now I've got nothing.
I was too stunned to speak.
I was looking for an excuse to leave you. I thought with 3 million, I could do whatever I wanted. I badmouthed my boss and quit my job, thinking I was set for life. But when I found out I had no money, my mistress left me. Now I have nothing, no job, no money, no home. It was clear now that Xander had been abandoned, and he had nowhere to turn. Sienna, you're my only hope, he begged, tears streaming down his face. I can't pay the loan on the house, and I have nowhere to live. I told you I don't know anything about that. If you stay here any longer, I'll take legal action, I warned. Don't forget the agreement you signed during the divorce. If you break your promise, I'll claim 5 times the alimony. That's enough, Xander shouted, his face contorted with anger. He raised his hand as if he were about to hit me. Are you seriously going to hit me? I asked, my voice steady. If you lay a hand on me, I'll call the cops immediately. There are security cameras in this apartment complex. Even if you run, your face will be caught on video. Xander's face turned pale at my words. Get out now, or I'll report you for trespassing. At the mention of a report, he fled. I heard the sound of him stumbling down the stairs, but I simply shut the door, indifferent to his fate. Xander never came back after that. Later, Xander's parents visited me to apologize. They hadn't realized how bad things had gotten. When I asked about Xander, they told me that he'd fractured his leg falling down the stairs that day and had to be hospitalized for 2 months. His medical bills piled up, and on top of that, he still had the mortgage and alimony to pay. Desperate, he begged his old boss to let him work remotely, but his resignation had been so rude that they refused to rehire him. His parents even had to help cover the alimony, and Xander was left scrambling to find work. Once everything had settled down, I visited Zaria's house. Her father greeted me warmly. I've always wanted to meet you.
Zaria talks about you all the time.
I didn't expect us to meet under these circumstances, but I'm glad everything has been resolved. I smiled, feeling grateful for the support that had come my way. Zaria's father truly had been my superhero after all. I just made a few calls. I'm glad it worked out, Zaria's father said with a modest smile. Zaria chimed in, beaming. I'm so happy to see Miss Sienna smiling again. I felt a deep wave of gratitude wash over me. Zaria and her father had truly been life changers. My husband had looked down on me for being a preschool teacher, but it was my job that had shaped me into the person I am today. Through this experience, I realized the importance of cherishing every encounter and relationship in life. With renewed purpose, I smiled to myself. I loved my job more than ever and felt determined to keep doing my best, both for myself and for the children I taught. It was time to move forward, stronger than before. My mom has always preferred my younger sister over me. Despite that, I did everything I could to support her because I felt I owed it to her for raising me. But everything changed when my sister decided to move back home. Without hesitation, my mom cut me off. She screamed at me, saying, "Get out of here, you leech. I'm done putting up with you. If this is what you want, I'll make sure you pay for every grudge I've ever held against you." Hi, my name is Aurora, and I'm 30 years old. After finishing college, I landed a decent job and continued living with my mom. My dad passed away a few years ago, and my younger sister, Zara, is already married with her own family. I had plans to move out and live on my own too, but after my sister got married, I stayed behind to take care of my mom. I couldn't bring myself to leave her alone. Looking back, it's clear that my mom has always favored my sister over me. Zara and I are complete opposites. She's beautiful, trendy, and has an undeniable charm, even though her personality is, well, not exactly the nicest. But somehow, she manages to hide that under her good looks, making her appear perfect to others. In contrast, I'm more serious and straightforward, which never seemed to impress my mom the way Zara's charisma did. After Zara got married and moved out, my mom constantly complained about me. She would say things like, "I wish I were living with Zara instead of you. Why does Zara have to be so pretty, and you, well, you don't have anything to offer? I'm so tired of seeing your face every day." Oh, how I miss Zara. It hurt to hear those things, especially since I was the one working to support both of us financially. My mom didn't appreciate any of it. Mom, I know you think Zara's great, but you don't need to put me down like that. I finally snapped one day. But instead of calming down, my mom got even angrier. If you were half as good as Zara, I wouldn't have to deal with you like this every day, she shouted. You don't even have any real problems. We've been living here together ever since your dad passed away, and now you're trying to act like you're doing me a favor? I didn't mean it that way. I tried to explain. I'm here because I have no choice. If Zara hadn't gotten married, I wouldn't be living with you. Humph, my mom scoffed. That's enough. We live in a house that was rebuilt shortly before my dad passed away. Although the house is in my mom's name, I'm the one who has been paying off the remaining loan. Yet, she constantly compares me to Zara and criticizes me in every possible way. I was reaching my breaking point, living with a mother who made me feel unwanted every single day. Still, I couldn't give up on her, and there was a reason for that. When my dad died, my mom was devastated. She cried for days, barely ate, and was so weak that everyone was concerned about her. I felt an overwhelming responsibility to take care of her. I told myself that I had to step up and support her, not just as her daughter, but as the eldest in the family. For my dad's sake, I promised myself I would protect her, no matter what. Even though her words and actions hurt me, I couldn't bring myself to hate her entirely. She was the only parent I had left. Then, one day, out of the blue, my sister and her husband showed up at our house. As soon as Zara saw my mom, she burst into tears and said something that shocked me. Mom, we're struggling. We're having a really hard time making ends meet, she sobbed, and my mom's face immediately filled with concern.
What's going on? My mom asked.
Well, Zara started, my husband just lost his job, and we can't afford our rent anymore. My mom's eyes widened. Oh no, that's awful. I don't know what else to do. I really need your help, Mom. Can we stay with you for a while? Zara pleaded. As soon as she said that, I knew things were about to take a turn for the worse. But before I could say anything, my mom jumped in with an enthusiastic, yes, of course. My precious Zara is in trouble? Of course, you can live here. Zara's face lit up, and she hugged my mom. Thank you, Mom. I love you so much. My mom beamed with joy, clearly thrilled by the idea of having Zara back. They had made the decision without even consulting me, as if my opinion didn't matter. Feeling frustrated, I spoke up. Wait a second, Mom. I live here too. You can't just invite them to move in without asking me. My mom turned to me, her expression blank, and said, So what? I was stunned by her response. Mom, 2 more people are going to move in just like that? Where am I supposed to go? I have my own room. I don't care what you think, she interrupted coldly. This house is in my name, remember? That's true, but I started to argue, but she cut me off with a heavy sigh. If you don't like it, Aurora, then maybe it's time for you to leave. Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. What? Are you serious? You heard me, she said, completely unfazed by my shock. I told you to leave. From the start, you were nothing more than a stand-in for Zara in my life, you know. My mom snapped at me, her words cutting deep. I stood there, stunned. That's horrible.
You don't need to talk to me like that.
I don't need a leech like you around. Now that Zara is coming back, I have no use for you. Her words stung. How could she dismiss me so easily after all the years I spent taking care of her? I had dedicated so much of my life to supporting her, while my sister had barely lifted a finger after she got married. But despite everything I did, it was Zara who had always been her favorite. I couldn't believe how easily she was ready to cast me aside. Tears welled up in my eyes, but I fought to keep them from falling. Then my sister, seeing the situation unfold, chimed in with a smug grin on her face. Sis, Zara said with that sly tone I had always hated. Mom's right. Why don't you just get lost? What? I asked, disbelief coloring my voice. You heard me. There's no space for you here now. We don't need you. I'm the one who's been supporting Mom all this time, I argued, my voice trembling with a mix of frustration and hurt. Zara rolled her eyes. So what? Mom wants to live with me now. You're nothing but a nuisance. Just go already, you're trash. Without missing a beat, Zara turned back to my mom and her husband, and the three of them began happily planning her move. They were talking about things like having a big barbecue to celebrate the move, while I stood there, invisible to them. I'll get the meat for the barbecue, my sister chirped excitedly. That sounds great, my mom replied, completely ignoring my presence. I couldn't believe it. As they laughed and talked about their plans, it was as if I no longer existed. Then Zara turned back to me, her tone now filled with impatience. Hey, why are you still standing there? Didn't I tell you to get out? But you can't just throw me out like this. I protested. We don't need a parasite like you hanging around. Just leave already and give us some space. Be out by the end of the week. That should be enough time, right? Her words felt like daggers. I clenched my fists, holding back the wave of emotion that threatened to spill over. I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of seeing me break down. Reluctantly, I nodded and left the room, my heart heavy. As if that wasn't enough, while I was packing, I overheard my mom and Zara planning a vacation. We'll be gone for a few days, my mom said. Just make sure you're out by the time we get back. Those were her final words to me before they left the house. To her, I was nothing more than a burden, something to be discarded now that Zara was back in the picture. I had tried for years to be the good daughter, but now I realized that no matter what I did, it was never going to be enough for my mom. I was done feeling sorry for her. The sympathy I had once felt for her was gone, replaced by a burning desire for revenge. And so, with a new resolve, I took action. I contacted a moving company immediately and made arrangements to move out as fast as possible while my mom and sister were away. The movers arrived, curious about the situation. Are we taking everything? One of them asked, noticing the amount of furniture being packed. Yes, please, make sure to clear everything out, I replied with a smile. I was moving into company housing, which had been offered to me a few times before. Back then, I had turned it down because of my mom, but now I saw it as the perfect escape. There were still vacancies available, so I quickly filled out the necessary paperwork and started my new life. The company housing was better than I had imagined, spacious, clean, and far from the toxic environment I had been living in. As I settled into my new place, I checked my phone and saw several missed calls from both my mom and Zara. I wasn't surprised. I knew they would be furious once they returned home. Their voicemails were filled with demands. Get back here now, the messages screamed. Although I had expected this, the number of calls exceeded what I had imagined. I knew that if I ignored them, they might show up at my workplace, so I decided to confront them after work. When I arrived at the house, both my mom and sister were waiting for me, with anger blazing in their eyes. The moment I walked in, my mom shouted, "What the hell happened? Why is the house empty? You even took my favorite fridge and toaster," Zara added, her voice shrill. I stood there, calmly watching them rant. "Where did you take everything?" my mom demanded. "To my new place," I said, my voice steady. "You can't just take things without permission. Bring it all back, now." Zara screamed, her face flushed with rage. "Why should I?" I replied, unbothered. "What do you mean, why? All that stuff belongs to Mom," my sister yelled, her frustration growing. I couldn't help but laugh. "What's so funny?" Zara snapped, her voice filled with irritation. "I'm sorry," I said, shaking my head. "You must be mistaken." Zara's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" "Everything that was in this house, every piece of furniture, every appliance, I bought them with my own money." Her face fell. "That's not possible. All of this was here from the beginning." I crossed my arms. "No, it wasn't. I paid for everything. Since I'm moving out, of course I'm taking what's mine." My sister's mouth hung open in shock, but I wasn't finished. "And, by the way, the bank account you're talking about? That was my money, too." Zara looked as if she was about to explode. "You emptied the account. How could you?" "Simple," I said. "It was my money. Why wouldn't I take it all?" When I pushed her buttons a little, my sister's face flushed with anger, and she stormed toward me, shouting, "Don't mess with me." She was practically in my face now, red with fury, and she screamed, "Give back the money." That big book should have had Dad's insurance money in it. I blinked, confused. What are you talking about? The money. It's not there? Of course it's not, I said flatly. That money's long gone. No way. The last time I came over, there was a lot of money in that account, she insisted. That was just me adding in some of my own earnings bit by bit, letting it grow over time. I explained. But Dad's insurance money? That's been spent ages ago. My sisters had snapped toward our mom, eyes wide in disbelief. My mom, caught in the spotlight, quickly averted her gaze, guilt written all over her face. "Mom, is this true?" my sister asked, her voice trembling. Well, my mom fumbled, avoiding eye contact. Seeing that my mom wasn't going to answer, Zara lost it. "What the hell, Mom? I came back here because I thought Dad's insurance money was still in the house." Mom tried to calm her down, muttering, "Just calm down, Zara." "How can I calm down?" my sister shrieked. "You're the one who wasted all of Dad's money. What are you going to do now?" I just wanted us to live together again and be happy," Mom mumbled. "You came back because you wanted to live with me, right?" Zara's response was sharp and bitter. "Are you kidding me? I only came back because I needed to pay off my debts." "Debts," I repeated, and as the conversation unfolded, I learned the truth. My sister and her husband had gotten themselves into deep trouble with gambling. They owed a huge amount of money and had returned, not out of love or family bonds, but to grab what was left of Dad's insurance payout to clear their debts. Worse yet, they had gambled more in a desperate attempt to pay it off, only to sink further. Eventually, her husband lost his job due to corporate downsizing, leaving them with no income and nowhere else to turn. It was only now that my mom realized how she'd been played. She had forced me out of the house on a whim to make room for Zara, without understanding that they were using her. This was the result of her poor judgment. "Well, now you understand, right?" I said, my voice steady. "There's no more insurance money here. All that's left is the mortgage on this house." Without warning, Zara burst into tears and ran toward me. "Wait, sis, please. My husband and I are buried in debt. We can't pay the mortgage on top of that." "That's not my problem," I said coldly. "Let's figure this out together. You can live with us and help out, just like before." I let out a short, bitter laugh. "Oh no. I didn't know you had fallen this far. Besides, Mom always wanted to live with you, didn't she?" "Wait, no. Please don't leave," Zara pleaded, desperation lacing her voice. "Yes, Aurora, stay," my mom added, her tone softer now. "We'll make it work, I promise." I shook them off, no longer willing to entertain their pleas. "I've supported you, Mom, in this house my entire life. I even paid for the mortgage, yet you threw me out the moment Zara showed up. You called me a parasite, and now you want me to stay and help? You must be joking. Zara isn't a cute little sister. She's a leech, a human parasite, and I won't be part of this mess anymore." I turned to leave, my final words hanging in the air. "You two will have to live with the debt yourselves. I'll never come back to this house again." As I walked out the door, I could still hear my mom and Zara calling after me, but I didn't stop. They clung to me until the very end, but I had no reason to listen anymore. I was done. Almost a month has passed since then. My mom and sister, realizing their mistake, started working part-time jobs just to scrape by. Even with both of them working, it wasn't enough. In the end, they had to sell the family home and move into a small, cheap apartment. Life there wasn't pleasant. They fought constantly, blaming each other for their situation. Zara would snap, "Mom, if you hadn't thrown Aurora out, I could have used her help." And my mom would retort, "I did it to make space for you two. You said you wanted to live with me, but all you cared about was the money." Their arguments grew more vicious by the day. Neither of them could survive without money, and without me, they had nothing. The three of them, my mom, Zara, and her husband, barely had enough to eat most days. They couldn't even afford new clothes. Meanwhile, my life had completely turned around. Moving into company housing was the best decision I'd ever made. My commute to work was shorter, and I had more time to relax and focus on myself. Looking back, I realized that being kicked out of my parents' house was the best thing that could have happened to me. I'm living a fulfilling, happy life now, and for the first time in a long time, I'm thinking only about my own happiness. So, in a strange way, I'm grateful that they pushed me away. It gave me the freedom I needed to live a better life.